Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel meeting. I declare the meeting open at 9:40, and in doing so acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and are joined by people from other lands around the state. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. Members are reminded to announce their name prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. My name is Clayton Hyam. I'm the presiding member for today's meeting, and with me I have Mr. Eugene Coltaz, the deputy presiding member, Ms. Dale Page, the third specialist member, and from the Shire of Waroona for the first item, we've got President Mike Walmsley and Councillor Naomi Purcell. For Part C, at the City of Kwinana part of the meeting, we'll have Councillor Matthew Rose and Councillor Ivy Penny. I have apologies from Councillor Barry Winmar from the City of Kwinana, and also noting that Councillor Winmar is on leave of absence at the present time. Minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving to Part B, the Shire of Waroona matter. I'm seeking a declaration of due consideration. Can panel members indicate they've duly considered all the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda by show of hands? Okay, yes, thank you very much. I'm seeking disclosures of interest. Councillors, did this matter go to a council meeting?
In 2021, yes it did.
Okay.
For endorsement?
Yeah, all right. But the additional matter didn't go to council, this matter we're dealing with now?
It has not, no.
Okay, thank you.
And has not been discussed at a council meeting, no.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm seeking any disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? No?
Nil from me.
Okay.
Councillor Walmsley.
All right.
And none from me, Councillor Purcell.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. All right. Move on to item 4, the Form 2 application. This is the amendment to the battery energy storage system, the inclusion of a gas insulated switchgear substation building. No presentations have been received. However, I've got Lena Ramley from Alinta is available to answer questions. Lena, is she online? Yes, Lena. Thank you. Panel members, are there questions of Lena? No.
I have no questions at this point, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. Yes.
Just a quick question, if you don't mind. So I note that you're seeking retrospective approval for the building. Is the building complete and operational?
The building is complete, yes, not yet operational.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. No further questions. Thank you for that. I'll move to the officers. Craig? Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions of the officers from panel members? No? No? You've got off scot-free. Well done. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move to the item itself, which is an approval with some conditions there, some new conditions and a new advice note. Is there a mover for the published recommendation for approval? Well, thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Happy to second, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Walmsley.
Councillor?
Yeah, look, happy to support this. Form 2, the site is within an established industrial complex, a sizable industrial complex, significant distance from any sensitive receptors. Given the building has already been constructed, there is some certainty about the built form and therefore a lot of confidence in the lack of impact in surrounding areas, so happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Walmsley?
I second those comments as well. And just referring to the drainage management plan that I'm not sure has been submitted yet, but before the building is commissioned or used, just to reiterate that conditions are upheld, that's all.
Thank you very much. Further speakers on this matter?
I support it. Concur with the comments made previously.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Purcell, did you want to say anything on this?
No, I have no further comments. I'm happy.
All right. Yes, no, I'm more than happy with it as well. It's a large building, but in the context of its industrial setting, I think it is quite all right. And it's, as the RAO states, it's consistent with the prevailing character of the area and planning framework. So back to Dale to one. Nothing further. Okay. I'll put the motion to approve. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you to President Walmsley and Councillor Purcell for your attendance and participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
We'll move on to part C. Of the agenda. Councillors on board there. So welcome to Councillor Rose and Councillor Penny. There she is. Declaration of due consideration. Can members please indicate that they've duly considered all the material contained in part C of the agenda and related information? All right, thank you very much. Disclosures of interest. Councillors, did this matter go to a council meeting?
No, it has not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations or disclosures of interest?
None from me.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Moving on, then we have a presenter, Daniel Lewis from Element Advisory, and just noting that Daniel also has indicated he wants to speak to the alternate recommendation. Noting you've got 3 minutes, but I'll be a little bit lenient with the...
I'll stick, if you don't mind, I'll keep it brief to the two key salient points, and then if the panel decides to elect to move to the alternative, I'm happy to speak specifically, because there, with respect to time, I don't want to go on a big tangent around conditions and details if that's not where the panel decides to move today. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to the panel this morning. What the panel has before them is a decision to make based on evidence that's presented, specifically in relation to the CCW on site at lot 9000 Orton Road, Casuarina, and the evidence and the work that's been done by the applicant. There's two key points that I really want to reiterate up front to the panel. One relates to the tumulus spring and the advice from DVCA, and the second relates to hydrology modelling. Let me just organise this quickly. The first point I want to make in regards to the tumulus spring relates to the referral advice that we've received back from DVCA. Notably, in the response that we get from Benson Todd is that the subject site exhibits characteristics that are consistent with the description of the organic mountain spring. However, to date, there has been no evidence supplied which is to show that there is actually a spring located on lot 9000 Orton Road. Specifically, I relate to attachment 5A, fourth paragraph, which says, the habitat of the tumulus spring is characterised by continuous discharge of groundwater in raised areas of peat. There is no disputing that this is a high value CCW. That's undisputed from the applicant and has been reflected with our buffer. However, what is disputed is that there's been no evidence to suggest that there's been a discharge of groundwater within the CCW, and DBCA are yet to provide that evidence. Our expectation would be that if there was a site assessment that had groundwater coming out of the ground, we would have seen evidence of that within a submission. None of that has been provided, and none of that, in our opinion, that should be provided. From what that notwithstanding, we accept that this is a high value CCW, and therefore the two key considerations to protect the CCW are surface and groundwater, which is referenced by DBCA. To that end, High 2O have prepared a water balance model, which was revised based on Dwer's comments. And I want to make two really key points around the water balance modelling. The City of Kwinana have not assessed the water balance, but have just referred it to Dwer. Dwer have not actually taken the time to assess it in detail and provided categorical evidence to suggest that the assumptions made within are incorrect. I'd also like to make reference to the fact that the advice that we got ahead of the March DAP meeting was that we needed to comply with the Dwer's water quality protection notice number 15. That has a conservative rate of evaporation. This is post extraction at depth. That has a rate of evaporation at 1 millimetre per day. We felt, based on our site assessment from our permeability testing, that was too low, and have hence modelled it based on a 1.3. That's on the evidence from Sasha. Sasha's online to answer any questions if we need to. So in essence, we believe and strongly believe that the evidence presented to the DAP is very clear that our operations are not having a material impact. Notably, in the water balance modelling, in the total volume of water in a year, we're less than 0.3% impact through evaporation, based on an increase in the evaporation rate to what Dwer have actually provided in their previous correspondence. There's a couple other things that from our perspective are disappointing in regards to where DBCA and Dwer are sitting. I can pull.
Last 2-3 minutes.
For the removal of any doubt, I want to be very clear with the panel that the applicant has provided the evidence and it's site specific. Our groundwater monitoring on site with our 5 bores correlates to the Casuarina Central Local Structure Plan and the Local Water Management Strategy. There's no question that we're not impacting groundwater. The question then becomes surface water and the evaporation rates, and our water modelling is considered, in our professional opinion, is considered accurate, and there's no feedback from either Dwer or DBCA to suggest that the key findings or anything tangible that we can work with moving forward to actually be able to update or look at a different scenario. And they were really the two key issues, and hence why we recommend the alternative for approval. But we have a number of concerns around those conditions, which I'm happy to get to if the panel decides to go to that point.
All right, we'll see if some questions from panel members. Yes, Dan.
So it appears from your submission, and you've reiterated it now to a degree, that you feel the referral agencies haven't fully considered all relevant aspects regarding the matter. You made a comment that the clearing permit process is the appropriate methodology for full consideration of the impacts on TEC. Is that correct? Will the issue of the TEC be captured by that clearing permit process?
Sorry, where is that made?
So there is, in your submission, you've talked about that the clearing permit process is the appropriate methodology for dealing with this in detail in the application.
In the original application?
Yeah, so the environmental approval process that you need to follow, and I think that it's in the DBCA letter, they actually refer to as section 45, something or another, is a process that needs to be dealt with, and a federal process as well. And are you of the view that that is the appropriate process for dealing with this bit of a stalemate about the TEC and the hydrology, or
Yes,
that did come through in your
yes.
submission?
Yes, I would concur with that that statement. What I would also say is that the advice from DBCA says the specific wording is if the proponent believes that they are impacting, which we don't based on our evidence, they should seek a referral as a section 45. So agree. I think there's an advice note. I don't have it in front of me, but there's an advice note to that effect. That's it's an advice note. We acknowledge that. There's no disputing that. However, back to the original point, there's no impact. Therefore, our argument, coming full circle, is that we don't have an impact. Therefore, we don't require a section 45. But separately, yes, there will be a clearing permit lodged for the scattered vegetation outside of that or within our footprint, the 3 or 4 trees that are in there. Yeah.
Further questions? Any further questions?
Yeah, just go to
Sorry, Councillor Rose, did you put your hand up then for questions? No, okay.
another advice note. The spring flora and fauna survey, is that something that you have to undertake? There is a condition 8. Have you undertaken one yet?
Condition or advice note?
Well, it's a condition 8 and it talks about the critically endangered Chimney spring, and then it says a buffer study includes a spring flora and fauna survey.
Yeah, so we specifically contest condition 8, specifically on the basis that to date there is no evidence that water is actually coming out, and we accept that there is wetland vegetation in there, but the TEC relates to peat and discharge of water. It doesn't relate to the actual vegetation, so we'd be seeking that to be removed entirely.
And the fact that you're not clearing any vegetation doesn't require a spring flora.
Correct. So so there's no, to be clear, and I think that was presented in March with those site photos. The site has a scattering of predominantly under the 330 kVA power lines,
Yeah.
and then a small section that has a scattering of a couple of trees. All the wetland and everything is not being touched, and we're well outside of that. So it's very clear on site. I think there's a photo. I can circulate it if the panel needs it, but it's very clear as to where the wetland vegetation is and isn't.
Okay.
So from our perspective, our argument is that we're not impacting surface water, we're not significantly impacting surface water, and we're not impacting groundwater, and therefore whether it's cumulus or CCW, it's going to stay as it is and be preserved. So.
Okay. And the POS plans that you've submitted, they're just concepts at this stage, aren't they?
Yep.
And I don't think there'd be any active POS required underneath the power lines?
No, so
Playing fields or things like
yeah,
that?
correct. No, there's nothing under the power lines that would that's requiring. That's just a deduction.
Yeah.
So there's no consideration for that. There is POS 4, which sits on the western side, which is about 1 hectare, but that's reflected in the concept. It's effectively a concept designed to show post-extraction what could work there.
Post-extraction, the POS design will be guided by the structure planning process anyway, for all
Correct.
of the land in
Yep.
that
Yep.
structure plan area.
Yep. And that ties back to the DCP contribution, because there's a proportionment, there's about 300,000 for acquisition for POS that's allocated to this site, and there's also 1.2 or total between acquisition and improvement for that POS section on this land holding, all dealt with through the development contribution. That is all dealt with at subdivision stage.
Thank you.
Anyone, if you could take us through the alternate recommendation and your your concerns or comments on the conditions proposed.
Sure. Let me just walk the panel through. So conditions 1 to 4 are considered acceptable. They're pretty standard in their wording and what they refer to. 5-year approvals is acceptable and requiring extractive industry licence subsequent to this approval is industry standard and acceptable. That coincides with the road deterioration, which I believe is an advice note. That's included. Yep, the advice note's included. So that relates to, on a per tonnage basis, an industry standard contribution to the local government for maintenance of roads.
So going back to the approvals, condition 3 says 4-year approval period.
That's a substantial commencement.
Oh, okay, all right, fine. Yep, sorry.
And obviously, if at the point in which substantial commencement, that's a 5-year approval. So 1 to 4 are fine. 5 is a concern. Chatting with the City of Kwinana this morning, our understanding is that the 70,000 tonnes of sand per annum was taken out of the traffic impact statement, which the traffic impact statement at section 5 refers to approximately. If the panel decided that that's a nominal amount based on the lifetime of the quarry, and on an average would say 70 per year. However, if the panel decided to amend that number, more is acceptable. However, there is also an opportunity post approval for the client to seek in writing if they sought over that. So it's not a critical one for us. Condition 6 is problematic, specifically for our client. There's not a community infrastructure contribution. However, Kwinana's scheme is worded in such a way that development contribution is payable under DCP 3 for development and has no exemptions, even though this has no need or nexus, and we'd argue that. However, our preference is for that condition to be removed entirely. However, should the panel decide not to remove it based on feedback from Kwinana, we want specific wording in there to say that the landowner agrees to a deed to defer the contribution to a later stage, at subdivision stage, which is most appropriate. So I can provide wording to the panel on that specifically. Condition 7, this relates specifically to the water management plan, and it comes back to the point as to whether the panel is going to accept the water balance modelling that's presented to them. If the panel accepts the water balance modelling and the groundwater monitoring report, condition 7 falls away in its entirety. I would like to make a comment though, that the applicant, the landowner continually monitors the groundwater on site every year, and the monitoring bores are on site. So it's just an industry standard to make sure that you maintain your separation distance, that you check during winter peak. That's just how they operate, to maintain the separation distance. So if the panel decided that there needed to be a condition around maintaining the separation to groundwater, we believe that would be best placed with a simple condition that just says if the applicant is to ensure that at all times it maintains the agreed 0.5 metre separation to the maximum groundwater level. Condition 8 talks about the buffer study. I have spoken to this previously with Member Cortez. Our position is that it is a wetland. We're yet to see evidence that water's coming out of the ground. And from our perspective, our approach is to preserve the wetland and maintain the buffer as set by the CCW buffer as a high value wetland, and maintain it as per the structure plan. So our request is that condition 8 gets removed in its entirety. Condition 9 relates to condition 8. Simply a practical aspect. If, for argument's sake, if condition 8 stays in, it's problematic in this whole. The reality is our client can't proceed we won't proceed with the proposal. However, in the scenario, hypothetical scenario that they did, there's a risk that you would be fencing. Condition 9 talks about fencing the TEC. If the TEC doesn't align with the CCW when the vegetation is, in theory, you'd have to put a fence line within the middle of a wetland. It just seems odd. It makes more sense to just fence it on the buffer and leave it, and leave everything west of that buffer as no access. Leave it as a wetland and untouched. Condition 10. We're willing to concede that the buffer be fenced to restrict vehicle access. However, that concession is not made willingly. It's just an acknowledgement of the environmental values on site. Our preference is for it, which is an industry standard, to just use star pickets and flagging as any main road site or whatever, showing where the environmental area is to prevent access. But for the sake of the panel, if the panel decided in such that it had to be formally fenced, and everything else fell away, we'd consider it and accept it. Condition 11 talks about a wildlife protection management plan. This to us seems very strange, given the majority of our site has got no vegetation on it and it's under the power line. There's a couple trees. We understand that during works, wildlife will just go into where all the vegetation is, whether it's off-site to the northeast or whether it's to the west. To us, this just seems strange because there's hardly any vegetation on site. There's maybe 1 or 2 trees, and a full-blown wildlife management plan for trapping and relocation is just overly onerous for something that's not highly relevant, in our opinion. Condition 12 is problematic. On first reading, it might not appear problematic. However, it certainly is. An acoustic report, by virtue, doesn't assess vibration. So for the inclusion of vibration in an acoustic report is just inappropriate because the two don't go together. So including vibration categorically has to be removed because they don't relate. Specifically on the matter of vibration, machinery on site that are moving around don't operate in such a way like a compactor or a roller or any of those kind of machines that actually vibrate the ground to get compaction. None of that's happening. Pretty much you're scraping the topsoil off, scooping, loading, that's it. There's no vibration. Commentary from the City of Kwinana's engineering staff is around haulage on Orton Road, concerns around that. From a panel, it's very clear that any haulage on a local road is exempt from requiring, and we're not required to model the acoustic impact on a local road, and we're also not. We don't believe we're required to do a dilapidation report on a local road as we're moving. It's just a public road that we can work on. The second point I want to make, which is really critical, is it refers here to future sensitive land uses. Now this is cropped up, and I'm not 100% sure why this is in here, but if the panel left this condition as it is, future sensitive land uses, in theory, under the Casuarina Central Structure Plan, would require us to model if there was a house constructed and habitable on our boundary, because as you can fully imagine, as part of the structure plan, we got residential even coming into our property. So for us to model that on our boundary, we're non-compliant is the short answer. It's also it's not practical, because in the scenario where the subdivision was progressing to that extent, we would actually lodge a subdivision application over our site. All of this wouldn't be classed as an extractive industry. It would be classed as bulk earthworks through an engineering design, and all our operations are exempt under Regulation 13. So it's a bit of a moot point, but it's around timing. The reality is that this precinct needs a sewer trunk main to come from Costco, Casuarina, through the top. There's a whole nother precinct to the north that needs to be developed before it comes from Orton Road all the way south, plus EPBC referral and clearing permits. So the real reality is that we're not going to see development anywhere within a 500 metre radius of this site within the time frame of this approval. So on those grounds, we therefore say that specifically future sensitive uses should be withdrawn. However, if those two things are taken out, we believe we can provide, the City of Kwinana's engineering team are just wanting us to move where the source location is, just moving it to the, basically we're showing it at the centre of the stage. They want us to move to the eastern boundary. It won't make any difference on the acoustic modelling because our modelling is done on surface. We haven't included any earth bunds because of the background noises. It's all compliant. So we're very happy chatting with the officers this morning. They're happy around acoustics. They don't see it as a critical issue. And if the panel pulled those two things out, it'll be very easy for us to work with Kwinana. Again, similar, condition 13, chatting with the City of Kwinana this morning, they'd just really like to see a standalone dust management plan. The actions that we've got in our environmental management plan are all acceptable. They'd just like to have a standalone that you can kind of have you can kind of assess easily, which is fine. We're happy to work with that. Condition 14 as a condition reads like we're rehabilitating this portion of the site back to native vegetation. That's a real concern for us because that's not part of our proposal, nor are we wanting to. Our intent is really just to stabilise it so we're not having a dust issue. And then in the fullness of time when we develop the estate, that'll get developed as POS, so mulch, landscaping, gardens, parks, etc. So condition 14 is very problematic for us, specifically seeding of endemic native species. Dust and weed management is not an issue for us. We have, that's all part of the environmental management plan and we're doing that anyway. Final ground contour levels, that's not an issue, but the revegetation is specifically a key issue for us because we're not proposing to rehab. So our preference would be for that condition to be substantially reworded if we were to include a rehabilitation condition. 15 is just an all-encompassing, if there's any changes that gets covered. 16 is okay. 17 relates again to the buffer of the tumulus TEC. We, as condition 8, we can test, like I said before, we can test that. And therefore, if the panel decided that condition 8 would go, 17 would follow. Condition 18, in our opinion, is problematic. We accept the premise on which the condition is worded. We're happy, and our management plans show that no access to within the 50 metre buffer is appropriate. However, the term and ongoing maintenance is vague. From our landowner's perspective, they're required under the bushfire regulation to maintain a fire break. There's other things, general maintenance, weed management, that type thing of actually improving the wetland buffer. In a literal reading of condition 18, that wouldn't be allowed. So I would suggest just removing an ongoing maintenance out and including the word vehicle access, just to make sure that that condition is very clear in its intent. 19 is appropriate, we're happy with that. 20 is appropriate, we're happy with that condition. 21 is appropriate for dust management, we're happy with that condition. Condition 22 around must implement rehabilitation works on the land in accordance with the approved rehabilitation plan. Again, to us that's stabilised, that'll be set. We are already recommending stabilisation and ready for future development, so we're happy with that, pending the decision on what condition 14, condition 14, condition 14 is. And 23 is okay. That's pretty well in industry standard. So that's all the conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions. I did say that there was a lot of changes.
Right. Are there further questions from panel members?
We've got some, yes, through the chair. There's a number of advice notes relate to conditions, such as advice note 3. Is that one still required to be kept?
So advice note, if the panel decided that condition 8 fell away, advice note 3 would obviously fall away because the two are connected. we would expect that advice note 4 would remain because it's an advice note. We expect condition advice note 5 would remain. That's okay. Advice note 6 is okay. The reason it's okay is because of what DBCA have said. If the so it says advised to refer if the development is likely to impact the hydrology, and on both. 7 is okay. Happy to work with that. Like I said before, it's under the license. We're already of the expectation that it was coming. 8's standard. 9 is standard. And 10 is standard.
Okay, thank you.
All right, further questions of the applicant? No. Councillors, no questions? No. Okay, thanks.
Sorry for the luck.
Okay, we'll move to the officers now. I suppose the obvious question is your comments on the comments of the alternate motion.
We've just got Brett in the room to do it.
That's very good, sorry, I was looking for you there, but
You can have the hot seat.
thanks, Brett, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, yeah, first, sorry, I was a bit late, there was an issue with the lifts apparently, but here now. Yeah, look, I think, you know, our report and the reasons for refusal are fairly clear and I expect sort of well understood given the duration of this application and assessment. There's still those critical matters around the impact on the TEC in particular that haven't been demonstrated to the satisfaction of DWER and DBCA, that the development won't impact on that. So that's fairly straightforward. If you've got questions around that, we've got Mr. Brett Dunn from DWER attending online, as well as our environmental planner, Christine Burdenshaw. I've also got officers, Asher Logan at the city online as well, if you want to talk about the conditions. So I'm happy to just move into questions if you'd like.
We'll deal with perhaps the people online if you like. Are there questions of Brett or the DWER people? Dale?
If we were to approve the alternate, and the applicant chooses not to refer to the state and federal agencies, then what? Would the city refer?
If we're able to, yep. I mean, I suppose that sort of comes to the crux of our recommendation is that we, and you know, normally in a sort of greenfield development sort of setting, if there's federal referrals or approvals required for clearing of vegetation or bush or things like that, that can be quite a lengthy process. You know, you're talking a couple of years of surveys and then the assessment and all that sort of stuff. Usually at the planning development or development approval stage, we've sort of seen those approvals are in place or at least significantly progressed before you're dealing with a sort of on the ground development approval. In this case, the TEC wasn't known when the application was lodged, but obviously through you know, on-ground site visits and assessment, it has now become clear that there is a, you know, critically endangered TEC on site. So I think the impact of, or the potential impact of this development needs to be sort of fully understood, and if referral and if approval is required, then our position is, well, that should happen because it can be lengthy. We don't know what the outcome is. It could be a buffer up to 200 metres, who knows? But we think it's premature in this instance to deal with the development approval in the absence of that certainty around what constraints are on the site.
So just as a follow-up, I mean, as you know, and your report outlines it, if we chose to defer, again, for the fourth time, to allow the environmental experts to come to an agreement, we could be here forever, to be frank. So, if we weren't to refuse, because here we are as a planning decision maker, looking at planning merits, environmental issues are obviously one of those. But if we just keep looping this thing over and over, we could be doing that forever. So if we were to approve it today based on the other planning merits, because this is an outstanding environmental matter that it doesn't seem can be easily agreed. And one expert says it's not an issue, another says it's an issue. So here we're going. What is the, aside from just refusing it, what, and I don't know if this is one for your environmental experts, but what recourse is there for the city to deal with this environmental issue separately?
Yeah,
And I
sure,
can't
sure.
hear, so you'll need to.
Christine Burton, Kwinana, Environmental Planner, thanks for the opportunity. So under the EPBC Act, under the Federal Government Act, it's the proponent's responsibility to refer. So once, if it gets decided, then it's up to the applicant to refer. The city and the state have no mechanism by which to have the matter addressed by or referred to the Commonwealth Government. I think it's important to acknowledge that a tumulus mound spring, a threatened ecological community, is a lot different from your garden variety conservation category wetland, especially in regards to the hydrology. The hydrology is such that a capillary of water is pushed up through a sand dune and seeps out of the side of the sand dune, so it's constantly wet all year round. And because it's constantly wet all year round, it's got this unusual hydrological function where it pushes up out of the side of sand dune. It doesn't form in the low point in the landscape. It actually seeps out of the side of the sand dune. It's wet all year round, and because of that, it forms a unique assemblage of plants and animals around that wet peat mound where it's pushed up out of the ground and is wet all year round, and therefore supports a totally unique assemblage of flora and fauna. There's only 27 hectares of that flora and fauna that is known and protected in the world. So the hydrology is very, very complex, and that is why the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, Brett can speak to this, provided so I've seen the water seeping out of the ground, and it's directly adjacent to the applicant's lot right on the boundary, and then it seeps down into the greater wetland areas. I've witnessed rainbow beetles because of this around this area, black cockatoos every time I go down there, and black glove wallabies at the site, which is pretty rare for the Swan Coastal Plain, all protected species. When DBCA and myself and my officer went out on site and investigated the area, we found the tumulus mound springs seeping up on the adjacent property right at the fence line. So that would suggest that the hydrology is the catchment of that hydrological function of the capillary coming out of the hill is of the site that we're determining. So we don't really know. The modelling that's been done hasn't modelled this tech, hasn't modelled this hydrological function. And when we became aware of the tech, we asked WRF for specific information that would model this particular phenomena, and WRF provided specific hydrological instruction, and that's why when we got the report back from the applicant, WRF refused it and said it wasn't adequate because it is still addressing the function of a groundwater fed CCW and not a tumulus mound spring capillary that leaches out of the side of the hill. It's a really unique feature.
Yeah.
Very, very few of us have experience in it. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's the first time I've had the opportunity to deal with this sort of critically endangered anomaly. You just don't see them every day, so it's very unique, and the hydrology is really complex, and that's why we don't have in-house hydrologists, and that's why we deferred to Brett and his hydrologists. And perhaps Brett could explain better than I could.
I'll through the PMS, I'll defer to Brett in a minute, but so obviously you've described quite comprehensively what the concern is from your point of view. That's going to be around even if this doesn't happen, right? So you've got an approved structure plan over this area, and the applicant's going to face this issue even when they develop the site for something else or for the intended structure plan purpose, is it not? So
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and look at the time the structure plan was approved, this wasn't known. But when they apply for subdivision, then this issue will come up again and will need to be addressed.
So we're already providing proactive information that we've got from DBCA and DWER to the applicant who's looking at structure planning the south of this area, what we call Casuarina South. We're already providing all this information that we've got in regards to the tech because of its rarity and uniqueness and complicated nature in defining the catchment and the hydraulics around that.
So can I just, when it was deferred last time, the applicant was asked to do some more modelling for water balance, and they, I understand, used the information provided by DWER.
I would. So this is DWER has had a look at that modelling, and despite being given strict instructions or detailed instruction of how to model this particular phenomena by the state's hydrologist, it's DWER's opinion that was not adequate, and I would defer to Brett for that.
So you're saying,
I'm not a hydrologist.
You're saying that the instructions were not adequate.
The modelling was not.
So the modelling did not follow the instructions.
That's correct, and that would be Brett's spoken to the hydrologist who's actually done the work. We had a conversation about it yesterday.
Brett, can you elaborate on that? You're on mute. You're on mute, Brett.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, I just got the request. The host would like to unmute me. That's good. Look, we've been brought in. I'm obviously the regional director for Kwinana Peel region. We've been brought in to look at the impact specifically of this development on groundwater levels and potential impacts to the TC. With regard to the modelling, now I need to make a distinction. Is a qualified hydrogeologist who has reviewed this information, not a hydrologist. A hydrogeologist more have that speciality with the movement of groundwater through geological features and have a high level of expertise in this space. It is a very niche type industry. So that is the lens in which this has been looked at. The model at this point in time was seen as not being fit for purpose with respect to being able to clearly define the management of that potential impact to the TC. The reasons for that were among the groundwater level was provided as an average maximum as opposed to a maximum. So that level of conservatism wasn't there to begin with. It was based on one monitoring event for a number of bores in the area correlated to a long-term bore 2 kilometres away. Unfortunately, that bore 2 kilometres away has a number of large abstracting users around it as well. So that in itself has some inherent inaccuracy. And when we're dealing with what is a high risk profile situation with this TC, there's a need to ensure the information is fit for purpose and rigorous enough. Now, there's also been misinterpretations within that modelling report on evaporation rates. I saw it quoted before that is within our water quality protection note 15 that we say it's 1 millimetre per day worth of evaporation for that half a metre worth of profile, and they conservatively went to 1.3. Unfortunately, that's incorrect. Our water quality protection note says 1 millimetre per day for 2 metres worth of undisturbed profile. They're proposing half a metre for a groundwater level, which is not well defined locally. For our hydrogeologist in using the what's known as the Darcy-Buckingham equation, just off the back of an envelope for Swan Coastal Plain Soils, was able to say that for 1 metre of profile, not half a metre, 1 metre, you're looking at 8.3 millimetres per day of evaporation. That is obviously going to increase exponentially with the smaller that profile gets. Again, dealing with a groundwater level that we're not quite sure where it is. So there's a need to do a little bit more monitoring in that space to clearly define where that level is if they're going to go down to half a metre. Otherwise, we're really not able to determine or define any impacts with any real accuracy. And our hydrogeologist was not confident in being able to advise in that space and there not be impact. So we're happy to work with the proponents, hydrologists on that to be able to better define what I'm told is a local area model with, say, enough monitoring to capture this winter's peak of groundwater level. You can do a what's I've been told is quick and cheap model, which is effective and fit for purpose to be able to define a decision and an impact appropriately.
Further questions?
So when you say quick, how quick?
Well, it's I guess it all depends on how good the hydrogeologist is. But I'm told that I guess the main factor in time is monitoring. And so if you're monitoring up to the peak, which will be October, maybe September, October, that gives at least a bit more of a better local data set on where that groundwater level's sitting. The one level monitoring they did on site wasn't even at its maximum. Obviously, the maximum is critical. So finding that critical level for this year's rain, and then being able to use the appropriate model to be able to determine what is an appropriate reflective maximum would be the way to go in that space. And I'm told once you have the data, the modelling shouldn't take that long. One would think that the qualified person could turn it over in a matter of weeks.
If I may. And with respect, because I'm not sure if it was you or your section that was involved, but you may be aware from our previous questions that this just keeps looping around. And as a panel of planning decision makers, we've now got environmental experts at 20 paces kind of trying to work this out, right? So I don't think it's appropriate for us to just keep deferring and deferring and deferring. How confident are you that the instructions given to the applicant were accurate or specific enough or clear enough for them to do the work that you're suggesting should have been done?
I think they were clear enough in that the relevant reference material was provided, the relevant water quality protection note, and that again speaks to the evaporation rate we were just talking on. I believe the approach is probably more reflective of how you manage urban development in these areas, where you're dealing with a bit of a different beast. In urban development, you're most of the time bringing fill in, you're increasing recharge due to the nature of urban development, and so that risk profile isn't as high with respect to that groundwater level, and you have drainage infrastructure often to manage that groundwater level too, because it's becoming a highly modified environment. I think for the basis of this, that the information was clear. I just don't think it's been implemented the right way. However, I'm more than happy for our guys to work with the proponent to ensure whatever work's done is fit for purpose, and the impact can be appropriately designed around.
Okay, thank you.
So Brett, you're based on your timeline to do that. We're looking at probably November, December this year.
Correct.
Okay. Further questions?
I have. You reviewed the proponent's comments that they have got bores on site.
Yep.
I'll ask the question of them later if it need be. Have they got enough bores? Are they monitoring bores? Have they got them in the right locations? And have they got enough data already? Because I don't know how far back their monitoring goes.
No, that's a great question. The first answer to the first question is yes, they have adequate bores on site. Our hydrogeologist was confident in that. Second is they only monitor them once to inform this process. So they've monitored their bores in their location. They've then taken the data from a bore 2 kilometres away and then tried to correlate what's here to that bore over there. So when the bore goes this high, they'll make an estimation that it also goes this high over here. Now that is a standard that is used at times, but it's always got to be done so in a fit for purpose context. Given the fact that this bore over here has a golf course near it and other big users as well, they're pulling hard out of that groundwater aquifer. That's impacting the levels that are over in this bore, which doesn't make for accurate readings some 2 kilometres away. So what we need to see happen is the existing bore network they have, which is great. Continue to monitor that, take that up to October to be able to get that maximum level. An appropriate area model can then be applied to that information, and that should be able to give them an accurate idea of where it's safe to mine down to, and considering that evaporation rate as well.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Further questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, we'll move.
So, Presiding Member, did you want us to provide
Sorry.
on the data that we've got?
We'll move to the item. There's a recommendation for refusal with some reasons. I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for that published recommendation. Is there a mover for the refusal?
Yes, I'll move that.
Yes, Councillor Rose, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, thank you, Dale. Okay. Councillor Rose, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to our presenters. In our previous meeting, the panel took the cautious approach to defer this matter to confirm the presence of the Cumulus Springs on the subject site and to receive comments from DWER and DBCA. That approach now has proved to be correct, the correct one to take as it stands, and because it has been confirmed that there is a TEC existing on the mound, on the subject land, sorry. The comments from DWER and DBCA indicate that sand extraction on this site does pose a significant risk to the TEC, and it is unacceptable. While the deputation states that the advice from DWER and DBCA, they state that it remains unhelpful. It is DWER that makes sure that the environmental values are protected and the development is sustainable. And it's DBCA that work to conserve WA's biodiversity, cultural and natural values. So it is their comments and advice that we need to take on board based on these decisions, as well as what we've just heard from the city's environmental officer, Mr. Dunn, who both provided valuable information which cannot be ignored. As we know, as we've heard, there's very few of these TECs remaining, and the preservation of our environment in Kwinana is one of the main focuses in our strategic community plan and ranks high on the list of priorities of our residents. With all due respect to Councillor Penny, it's a shame Deputy Mayor Barry Winmar, who was not available here today, as he is an Aboriginal person permitted to speak on behalf of his people. And he could tell you the significance of Cumulus Spring mounds and their association with ancestral stories and spiritual beliefs, and their significance as places of cultural practice and gatherings. So this discovery of this mound will be one of great interest to our Kwinana Council's Aboriginal Consultative Committee and our greater Aboriginal community as a whole. We've lost far too many of these TECs through associated practices with development, and even the slightest risk to a loss of another one should not be entertained here today. I note the alternative recommendation, and there are numerous requirements and referrals and approvals that the proponent needs to proceed. And the comment from DBCA is that it is recommended that the risk to the TEC is determined prior to the approval of the planning application, and that approval processes are aligned. We don't need to approve this application today, and the proponent needs to adequately demonstrate in the future that there is no threat to the TEC. So again, the panel should take another cautious approach and refuse this application as it stands, so we can ensure the survival of this very important and critically endangered ecological community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you. I will support the recommendation for refusal, albeit reluctantly. And I say reluctantly because, as alluded to in my earlier comments, coming into this meeting today, I was of a mind to go with the alternate for approval, because it felt after so many deferrals, we'd got to a point where it was environmental expert disagreeing, and this panel of planning decision makers was caught up in that. It's a critical issue for planning decision makers, but I felt it had come down to this one issue that no matter how many times we defer is not going to be sorted. So I was of a mind to approve, but sitting here today, and it's been very helpful. It's been very helpful to have the experts from the city in the room. It's been very helpful to have Dua online as part of this, so we could have a conversation rather than just dealing with referral letters. So thank you for your attendance. I really appreciate that. And you can see that it's actually made a difference, to my opinion. Another reason is dealing with the alternate, and thank you for the provision of the alternate, but it's sort of last minute where the applicant's then raising a whole bunch of concerns with the potential conditions, and this panel's then left on the hop to try and work out which ones to delete if we go with that and so on. So I am reluctantly going to go with the refusal today, because hearing what has said about the significance of this TEC, how little of it is represented more broadly, and the fact that there appears to be a lot more work that needs to be done before this panel could make a decision that potentially could eradicate this TEC, and even future uses, it's going to be an issue. Rather than deferring again for a significant amount of time, I'm more comfortable going with the refusal today and allowing the applicant, if they intend to continue pursuing this, to work with Dua and to work with the city and to resolve these issues to the extent that it may require a bit of a different proposal. So if we're starting to talk about buffers and so on, we're actually looking at different proposals. So on balance, reluctantly, and again, I'll say reluctantly because as an interim use, I think it's good to have an interim use rather than it just sitting there, and B, that interim use would help with housing supply. It's part of the housing supply delivery pipeline. So that is why I'm saying reluctantly I'll go with the refusal. There's just too much uncertainty from my point of view to say, yep, let's approve subject to those conditions which we're wrangling with at the last minute. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Further speakers?
Yes, look, I concur with Member Page's comments. I think that from my point of view, I too had some sympathy to the approval, given the delays that have occurred. If in fact the additional monitoring that's required, not just the monitoring, but also the interpretation of that monitoring, I think that it's well worth, I don't want to defer it. I think that the applicants can take the time to reassess the objections of the relevant authorities to their proposal, primarily I think on the basis of not enough information, and the applicants have been given a considerable amount of time to provide that additional information and respond to the comments from the responsible authorities, and I think that deferring it again will just put it through another process that won't have finality, and I think it's best that it be refused and the applicants commence their process again in the manner in which the authorities are recommending.
Thank you. Councillor Penny, did you want to make any comments?
No, thank you. I'm happy with what's been discussed, and I wholeheartedly endorse and support the comments of Councillor Rouse.
Thank you. I too am going to support the recommendation for refusal. I came in here this morning having read all the material, and I was all but prepared to go down the path of the alternate recommendation for approval, but then having listened to the experts, and again, like Member Page, I thank the city experts and Brett from Dwyer, because I think that's been very helpful this morning to fully understand why that standoff is occurring. So with that in mind, and with the thought that going down that approval path would probably pose too great a risk for this environmental TEC. So I'm now happy to support the recommendation for refusal. So Councillor Rose, back to you to wind up the debate.
Yes, thank you. Nothing really further, except that I agree with you, the panel members, of the value of the evidence presented by the environmental experts here today. So I thank them for their attendance, and thank you for the discussion.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now put the recommendation for refusal. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. There's moving on. There's no forms 2. There's no section 31s. Part D, there's one item for SAT listed there, and I close the meeting at 10:46. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you.